Hello, my name is Justin Holmes, and I am a professor of political science and also a member of the American Democracy Project here at UNI. And among other things that I focus on, one of my key interests is political communication. And so today, what I'd like to talk with you guys about a little bit is how to find quality political news. You may find yourself getting a little bit frustrated. It's an election season and there are all kinds of claims and counterclaims and memes and TikToks and all those other things bouncing around. And it may be really frustrating to try to find out, what is reliable news, what's accurate, what sorts of things can help me make political decisions. So I'm here to give you a few tips as far as that goes. There's a real media environment paradox right now, to my mind. So there's never been more information available about politics. When I think about, following political news when I was in college, for example, back in the dark ages, it was the very early days of the internet. You could get the New York Times and it was an 8-page PDF that you would download every morning. That's about it. At this point, you probably have a phone in your pocket that has essentially a way to access all of the information about politics that you could ever imagine and then some. That's pretty cool. On the downside, it has never been harder to evaluate what is accurate and what is not. So again, if we think about political coverage from, back 20, 25 years ago, you had a few major outlets, they had reputations for being accurate. You could go to them and sort of trust what you see. Now you see things from all over the place, and it's really hard to tell what's accurate and what is not. There's a lot of not accurate out there. Election season tends to make this worse. Certainly, the time that I spend on social media, my blood pressure has gone way up with the kind of vast variety of nonsense that I end up seeing. So, we're going to try to find you a couple ways to find things that are actually worth looking at. There are some things that we should be wary of. In general, if we see memes on social media, the best of those tend to be about half truths. Often they're things that are totally ridiculous. Remember, anybody can write anything on a picture and stick it on Facebook or Twitter or wherever people are finding their social media stuff today. You want to always be wary of those. We'll talk in a minute. They may make some claims that you can find ways to check out and figure out what's accurate of them and what's not. But for the most part, just because something is a picture with some text on it, as Abraham Lincoln said, don't believe everything that you read on the internet. Be wary of things with no sourcing. So again, any sort of claim that does not give you an indication of where it comes from, those are things to be wary of as well. Yesterday, I saw in the comment section on a news story the claim that Social Security is currently taxed at 50%, and one candidate wants to tax it at 80%. Those are both complete nonsense. Nobody's taxing Social Security at 80%. It's not taxed at 50% now. And this was a source that had this was just somebody's post, no attribution. On top of that, the kicker was, they said, "Oh, do your research." Well, yeah, my research says that that's all complete nonsense. But those are things to be wary of. Things from websites, accounts, etc., that you've never heard of. So one thing, again, there's a proliferation of sources out there. In some ways, that's a nice thing. We don't have sort of a couple legacy media companies with a monopoly on information. On the other hand, you keep seeing kind of new sources out there, and it's often hard to tell: is this something that is a legitimate news source? Is this just a bunch of BS with a logo stuck on it? That's a challenge. And lastly, and I think this may be covered by my picture here as we have set up the screen, does it pass the smell test? There are certain claims that are just going to be so absurd that on their face, they're probably not worth considering. Uh, these are things of the tabloid variety. Now, again, that may be a little tricky because hey, our smell for political news is not always well calibrated and may often be clouded by some of our own political biases. All right, these are some things to be wary of. Some helpful things. There are a number of websites out there that do fact checks. And certainly, there are some times that I've had quibbles with all of these. And there are a number of people in politics that will complain that these are somehow biased one way or another against them. Usually, these are people that are mad about having just been fact checked. Uh, but Snopes.com, they've been around forever. They've sort of morphed a little bit. They started out largely with urban legends and things like that, but do a lot of political fact checks. And generally, I find them reasonably reliable. Political politic Politifact.com, factcheck.org. Both of these are fact checking projects that are focused explicitly on fact checking political stuff. If you see a claim out there that you are a little skeptical of, or gosh, even if you're not skeptical of it, it might be worth putting it into one of these three sites or all of these three sites. If you get some convergence there, that's a pretty good indication that they have a measure of truth on their side. Another possibility here is to just Google the claim. There are other folks that do fact checking from time to time. Uh, just recently, we've had a couple political debates, and a number of the networks are fact checking those debates in real time. Those things stay up. So, again, if you just Google a claim, you may be able to find that, a news network or a newspaper or something like that has already done a fact check of that as well. All right. Finding good sources. This is kind of the famous media bias chart. This has been kicking around, gosh, well, for six versions now, according to the header. Uh, I have some quibbles with some of the methodology. I have some quibbles with some of the specific placement. But I do think on the whole here, if you look at this kind of square up here that they call most reliable, with one exception, I think they are pretty much right. Uh, so, there are going to be news sources out there that are biased in certain ways, whether it's how they kind of frame stories or stories that they cover to excess or stories that they choose not to cover. Uh, but if you kind of look for some of the better sources, generally speaking, they are going to be fairly balanced and fairly reliable. I'd say fairly is underselling it. For our purposes, the Weather Channel not so useful. But some of the rest of these are things that I would pretty strongly recommend to people. So AP and Reuters, these are the two big wire services. National Public Radio, I like them because they go a little more in depth. Apparently, the Denver Post is real good, as is the Houston Chronicle. But for national news, I don't know how useful they are. Again, some of the legacy media networks here. We'll talk a little more about that in a minute. ABC, NBC, CBS. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Economist. A number of these uh, do quite good political reporting, and lots of it. Politico, Washington Post, Vox. They lean a little left, but generally speaking, it's fairly smart stuff. The Hill is kind of, if you want stuff quick, they have nice little summaries of things oftentimes. The Economist is British, but quite good. Unfortunately, most of their good stuff is paywalled, so there's that. The one that I would advise perhaps against is Newsweek here. This is the one big quibble in this square that I have. And this is coming from somebody who had a Newsweek subscription as an 11-year-old, just to give you my bona fides here. Newsweek basically went out of business. A new company bought it, and their quality is pretty shoddy at this point. So that is not one that I would recommend. As we get sort of away from this best stuff here, some of these others. They may have things of value sometimes. That is not to say that they are never any good. Uh, but you do need to be a little more wary. When we get down here into the red zone, this is just junk for the most part. I wouldn't waste my time, especially the double red zone down here. These are things that just have absolutely no value as far as political information might go. Again, this chart, it's not the be all and end all, but I think the general trend here is generally pretty right. For the most part, I have a bias towards what we would consider legacy media. So these are things that existed sort of before the existence of the internet. And I think, for these, generally they have a pretty good track record. They don't get everything right, but they have strong incentives there. In general, if you are somebody like the New York Times or the Washington Post or the major TV networks, they have reputations to maintain, and in particular, part of that reputation is accuracy. These are all also entities that put a lot of resources into doing actual reporting. If we were to think back a slide to the other, oh heck, we'll go back a slide. If we look at a lot of these other things that are in the less reliable area, a lot of these things aren't really doing original reporting. They are mostly offering commentary on what other people have reported. AP and Reuters, they have full-time staffs of people that do nothing but reporting, investigating, etc. Same for the New York Times, same for PBS, Financial Times, etc. And again, that has a lot more value than some of these other things that are really just sort of, commentary and repackaged, plagiarized stuff from other folks. So these legacy media things, again, that reputation to be accurate, the resources that they put behind reporting. The New York Times had a story recently on politics that they had three reporters working for a year on that story and that story only. You're not going to get that out of some of these others. When you look at these things, know the difference between reporting and op-eds. That distinction is largely a print media distinction, but it's also true for video presentations as well. There's a reporting side, and so for newspapers, this is your fact-based stuff. This is your original reporting. This is your just the facts, kinds of things. Op-eds, the editorial page, commentary shows, things like that. They might have some value, but these are people that are trying to persuade you. Generally speaking, the news page is not trying to persuade you. They are trying to present you, actual facts. They're trying to present you what's happening in the world. They're not trying to tell you what to think about it. And they have a real incentive there towards accuracy. These things also get fact checked. I can speak to this myself. I've been interviewed for political stories, and I did talk to the New York Times a few times. When they have called, after the interview concludes, they have a fact checker call back, and they say, "Did you talk to this person? Is this what you said? This is a quote they want to use. Is that an accurate reflection of things that you said? Etc." None of that happens on the editorial page, in op-eds, on commentary shows, etc. So those are real important distinctions. Some places with generally good political coverage. This is not an exhaustive list, and certainly I have issues, with the op-ed pages on some of these. But for kind of their straight reporting, I think the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, those are pretty much your three best sources, in my opinion, of original political content. They have a lot of depth. They put a lot of resources into it. And they are generally pretty politically neutral as far as their reporting goes. They are, again, striving for accuracy. The other that I'd throw in there as well is National Public Radio, whether you choose to listen to it or use, their website. Again, them along with PBS, they do excellent, excellent reporting, and sometimes a little bit more in depth. There are other good places as well, but my general feeling is that these in their sort of regular reporting won't steer you too wrong. One last tip that I have here is that you should probably try to vary your media diet. So relying on any one particular source might not give you the whole story. The sources that I listed a second ago, they I don't think are ever going to intentionally mislead you for the most part, but there may be sort of areas of omission, and so having sort of a variety of things in your media diet is a good idea. If you see a story someplace, check it out someplace else. See if it's reported the same way. See if they agree on the basic facts. If you're seeing agreement across a lot of sources, that's also a pretty good sign. One of the nice things with social media, I've kind of been a little skeptical of this a minute ago, but I will say now that there are some uses for it, you can use your social media sort of as a news feed. And it is sort of as good as you curate that particular news feed. But if you take a minute to like and subscribe a wide variety of sources, that can be a pretty good way to sort of even out your media consumption. Take a minute to like and subscribe to a wide variety, maybe some things that you don't wholesale agree with. Uh, but if you're looking at their content across a variety of these, that's more likely to give you a fuller and more accurate picture. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for listening. I hope that you guys find this at least a little bit useful. And I know that this is kind of a hard time to get accurate information, but I think if you use a few of these tips, you can be a little more confident in the quality and accuracy of things that you are seeing.